I'm Professor Singer, and I'm so happy to share some thoughts with you here. Today, we're going to explore a critical issue unfolding in Japan, one that has nothing to do with war or natural disasters. It's something far more subtle but potentially just as damaging: the collapse of Japan's population. What exactly does this mean, and why should we care? Let's begin with the facts. Japan's birth rate is at an all-time low, and its population has been shrinking for 13 years. In 2023, only 728,000 babies were born, while nearly 850,000 people passed away. Imagine a society where, for every new birth, 2 people die. The elderly population, now over 20 million people aged 75 or older, continues to grow. What do you think happens when fewer young people are entering the workforce and the number of retirees keeps increasing? The economy slows, and social systems like healthcare and pensions become unsustainable. But why does this matter to the rest of the world? What is the relationship between national power and population size? A nation's power, its economic strength, political influence, and military capabilities is closely tied to its population size. Fewer people mean fewer workers, less innovation, and a reduced ability to produce goods and services. A shrinking population weakens a nation's global standing. In Japan's case, this could mean a loss of economic and military influence. And it's not just Japan, many countries in Europe and America are experiencing similar declines in birth rates. What could this mean for global trade, stability, and security if more nations face population crises like Japan? Now, let's shift our focus to Africa. What lessons can Africa learn from Japan's experience with population growth and decline? Unlike Japan, many African countries are experiencing rapid population growth. But this growth won't last forever, and if we don't plan accordingly, Africa could face similar challenges. Africa's growing population offers tremendous potential for economic strength and influence, but only if we manage it wisely. This brings us to an important question: what are the best population strategies for Africa? Should we encourage high birth rates to maintain momentum, or should we focus on stabilizing growth for sustainability? A young and vibrant population can drive innovation and economic strength, but only if we have the infrastructure, healthcare, and education systems to support that growth. Balance is key. Too fast, and we strain resources; too slow, and we lose our potential strength. But let's not forget to ask, who is influencing Africa's population policies, and why? Throughout history, external forces have sought to reduce Africa's birth rates. International organizations like the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, USAID, and various Western governments have promoted family planning and population control programs, often citing concerns about overpopulation. The World Bank and IMF, through their structural adjustment programs, have also linked financial aid to the implementation of population control measures. NGOs like Planned Parenthood, Marie Stopes International, and foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have been key players in promoting reproductive health and family planning across Africa. While these efforts are often framed in terms of improving healthcare and economic outcomes, the underlying objective has frequently been to reduce birth rates. We must ask ourselves, are these initiatives in Africa's best interests, or are they driven by external concerns about overpopulation and resource scarcity? Africa's population strategies should be designed by Africans, for Africans, based on our own goals and future aspirations. Next, let's consider the future. What kinds of innovations does Africa need to thrive and prosper in the 21st century? Innovations in key areas like education, agriculture, healthcare, and technology will be crucial for managing population growth. Imagine if we could create technologies that improve crop yields, provide healthcare to underserved regions, or bring quality education to every corner of the continent. These innovations aren't just about convenience, they are essential if Africa is to turn its population growth into economic strength rather than strain. Finally, what role can you, as future inventors, play in shaping Africa's future. Every challenge presents an opportunity for innovation. The demographic issues Japan is facing today show us what can happen when population growth is poorly managed. Africa has a chance to turn its population growth into an advantage, but this will only happen if we invest in the right innovations. From healthcare technology to education platforms, you have the opportunity to create solutions that will shape Africa's future. So, as we reflect on Japan's population crisis, remember this: a nation's power is tied to its population size. For Africa, the challenge is to ensure that our growing population becomes a source of strength, not strain. We must navigate external pressures and design population strategies that suit our own interests. Through innovation and strategic planning, we can ensure that Africa thrives in the 21st century and beyond. The decisions you make and the inventions you create could be the key to turning population growth into prosperity.
Deep dive, ready to go deep. We're diving into population trends, but trust me, this is way more interesting than just numbers on a chart.
It really is fascinating stuff. It touches everything.
Absolutely. And you know me, I always like to bring in the experts, so we've got some seriously thought-provoking insights from Professor Singer for this one. We're going to kick things off by looking at Japan.
Okay.
Now, we usually picture Japan as this, technological powerhouse. Right? Always ahead of the curve.
Cutting edge, for sure.
Right. But Professor Singer is saying they're facing a real population crisis.
Yeah. It's a situation that really highlights an important point. A nation's population is really closely tied with its power in the world, wouldn't you say?
That's a good point. I mean, there's a direct link. It's everything. Economic strength, global influence, even military capability. It all kind of hinges on that population number.
Okay, so break it down for us. What's happening in Japan?
Well, their birth rate is plummeting.
Plummeting? Like how much?
Seriously. They've been shrinking for over a decade. And just last year, 2023, there were almost 100,000 more deaths than births.
Wow, that's a huge gap.
Huge. And think about this. Japan's got over 20 million people aged 75 and up.
Yeah.
That puts immense pressure on social systems. Imagine workforce shrinking, fewer young people, more people retiring.
Yeah. Who's going to support that aging population? It's not sustainable long term.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder what happens if this trend just continues. I mean, we're talking about Japan, a major player globally.
And it's not just Japan. Professor Singer, he points out that a lot of countries in Europe, even America, they're seeing these same declining birth rates. So it becomes a global stability issue.
Yeah, and their economies, their place on the world stage, all that is connected.
Right. It's almost like we're witnessing this slow motion shift in global power, and it's directly tied to population.
Yeah.
Really makes you stop and think.
It does. It really does. And speaking of shifts in global power, we have to talk about what's happening in Africa. Almost like we're looking at two sides of the same coin here.
It's wild, right? Japan with this shrinking population, and then we look at Africa, and it's like, boom, rapid population growth.
Yeah, total opposite ends of the spectrum.
But here's the thing. Professor Singer doesn't necessarily see that as a bad thing for Africa.
No, not at all. In fact, he sees it as a huge opportunity. It's all about how you manage it. So it's not just the numbers, it's how those numbers are managed, utilized, right?
Exactly. Think about it. Larger, younger population, that's a potential workforce. That's energy innovation.
Makes sense. Bigger market too, right? More consumers.
Exactly. But, and this is the big but, Professor Singer talks a lot about these external pressures that Africa faces when it comes to population.
Right. Like what?
Well, there are international organizations, big ones, you've heard of them, that are really pushing for population control measures in Africa.
Like the UN?
UN Population Fund, yeah, USAID, even the World Bank, the IMF, they get involved.
Interesting. And they're pushing for what, smaller families, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and they often tie financial aid to these programs, It's
Yes.
like, we'll help you out, but only if you implement these population control measures.
It makes you think, is it really about helping? Or is there something else going on?
And that's Professor Singer's point. He wants us to really think critically about this. Who benefits from a less populated Africa?
That's a good question. Who does?
Right. Are these programs really designed with Africa's best interests in mind, or are there other motives at play? It's a really complex issue.
Definitely complex. So we've got these external forces, but Professor Singer, he seems to be advocating for Africa to really, chart its own course.
Absolutely. He's a big believer in self-determination. He really emphasizes that African nations need to be the ones calling the shots. Their priorities, their resources, their vision for the future.
So it's not just about managing numbers, it's about empowering people, empowering a continent to make their own choices. But how do we actually make that happen? I mean, turning this population growth into a positive, what's the key? What did Professor Singer have to say about that?
So we're talking about a whole continent on the verge of like massive change, right? And this population growth, it could go either way.
Absolutely, a real turning point.
But Professor Singer seems optimistic. He keeps coming back to this idea of innovation being the key. What does he mean by that exactly?
Well, he wants us to kind of shift our perspective. You know, we tend to focus on limitations, scarcity when we talk about population growth, but what if we looked at it as fuel for innovation?
Okay, so like instead of trying to manage the numbers, we should be looking at how to actually empower people, give them the tools to solve problems. Exactly. And he points out there are already so many examples of this happening in Africa.
Like what?
Well, look at mobile banking, right? That's been huge for financial inclusion in Africa.
Yeah.
People who never had access to banking services before, now they're financially connected.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It's like leapfrogging over traditional banking systems entirely.
Totally. Or look at renewable energy. There are some really innovative solar energy projects happening in Africa, bringing power to rural communities.
Wow, so using tech to address these like fundamental challenges, right? Turning a potential problem into a solution.
Precisely. And Professor Singer's big message is, it's not just about importing tech from elsewhere. It's about fostering homegrown innovation, solutions designed specifically for Africa by Africans.
So he's putting out a call to action, basically. Future inventors, entrepreneurs, this is your moment.
Right. Imagine the impact you could have, the legacy you could build by creating technologies that empower an entire continent.
Now that is what I call a deep dive. We covered a lot of ground here, from Japan's aging population to the incredible potential in Africa.
It really makes you think about the bigger picture, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding global power dynamics, the importance of self-determination, and really believing in the power of innovation to shape a better future. Something to think about, right? And that's what we do here on Deep Dive. We give you something to think about. Hope you enjoy it.
Hello, dear friends. My name is Professor Singer, and I teach invention courses at Tharaka Invention Academy in Kenya. Whether you're just starting your creative journey or already nurturing your inventive spirit, our academy, through its book, The Strategic Application of Ever So Powerful Artificial Intelligence, as well as its online courses, equips you with the tools and guidance to transform ideas into impactful solutions. Innovation is for everyone, and together, we can turn challenges into opportunities and make a transformative difference in your life, your career, your community, and perhaps the world. We'd love to join you in your journey.